This is Haley from Loop by Loop Studio, and today I wanted to show you basically something that I've been experimenting with, and that is making hooked rugs that are unusual shapes and sometimes even have holes cut out of them. So that's why I have you over here in a wide shot showing you this piece that I just made. It's made out of wool fabric strips and yarn, and has a hole cut right out of the middle of it. So I wanted to show you how I'm finishing them, and we'll get some close-up shots so you can see how everything from how what it's hooked out of, and then how I actually make that hole, and then how I hang them on the wall, because these are made for the wall. So if you have any comments or questions, you can email me at loopbyloopstudio.com. You can always drop any of those comments and questions in the comment section as well. And you can check out my work and more information about my studio at loopbyloopstudio.com. Thanks. Okay, so I'm back here with my pieces, and I know that they're a little hard to see everything that's going on because the pieces are actually kind of large. These pieces are about 2.5 by 1.5 foot big, so it's just a little hard to see everything that's going on, but I'm gonna try my best here with the camera overhead. Basically what I need to do at this point is I need to trim between these two pieces to cut them apart, and then I need to trim all around the pieces to give them sort of a maybe 1.5 inch, 1 to 1.5 inch edge all the way around. So let me start by doing that. I'll work from this end here, hopefully you can see that, and kind of just wiggle my way up through these pieces. If I were to hook these again, I probably would try to hook them a little bit further apart, but you know, sometimes in the artistic process, things happen and you just end up going with it and not really paying attention to the technical side. So here we go. So the two pieces are separated now. I'm gonna put this first one I showed you over to the side and finish that another time. And then what I'm left with is this piece on its own. So what I'm going to do now is I'm gonna trim, like I said, around the piece. And when I have these little pieces of linen, I'm just going to discard them. These little shreddy pieces of linen really start to annoy me. About an inch, 1.5 inches all the way around this piece. I'm going to keep trying to move my hands in frame here. Let me go from this side because it's easier to cut. I'm a lefty, but I use my scissors right-handed, which I guess makes it easier for me. I don't need any special scissors as a left-handed person. Okay, and all this linen I'm going to discard or recycle. You know, you can use it for other projects. Sometimes, you know, a piece of linen like that might even be big enough to make a couple proddy pins on or something like that. You can always recycle. So this middle piece, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of wiggle my scissors into the linen here and make a couple snips. I'm going to snip kind of on the grain, up and down. I'm kind of meeting my scissors to the wool strips, or the wool loops, I mean, but not going, you know, maybe going a couple millimeters away from them. And I'll probably have to make these cuts kind of like a pizza. So I'm sort of learning how exactly I'm going to do this while I'm showing you guys. I have a general idea because I've made a few holes in pieces. But I believe in order to get it to fold the way I want, I'm going to need to do a pizza. This I'm going to try to get right in that corner there so I can make it nice and clean. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up folding these underneath. So I think that'll work with some extra trimming. So with these rugs, we have two types of curves going on that I can kind of handle a little bit differently. We have the convex curves, which are curves that are going out like a circle, and then we have these little concave areas that are angles that I'm going to have a challenge when I actually want to fold this behind the rug. I prefer to fold the linen behind the rug and kind of affix it to the back rather than just cutting it. I think that it gives the rug just a little more strength. So what I end up doing in these concave areas, almost like how I dealt with the circle, is I end up just snipping with my scissors as close as I can to the loops without actually touching the loops. And then I can easily fold these back. But that's where the matte medium comes in, is I like to give it a little bit of a glue before I do that, just to, again, to kind of strengthen the linen, make sure it's not going to unravel, and give it a little more integrity. This angle here is another convex angle that I can kind of fold in multiple kind of folds like this onto the back, so I don't need to worry about this angle, or curve I should say. Here's another concave place where I'm going to need to snip before I'm going to be able to fold. So that, just like that. Here's another one. This should be okay here. As you can see, the pattern is anything that's concave I can usually handle all right. It's just these convex, I'm sorry, gosh, I always mix up those words. The convex is usually okay. It's just the concave that requires a little more work. And of course the hole here is going to require a little bit more fancy trimming. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to start trimming my pizza, and it's going to leave only, I don't know, what you call it, the crust, I guess. So I'm trimming away the bulk of these triangles so that when I start ironing these areas to the back, it has less bulk and will sit a little more flat. So I'm giving myself about an inch of crust, extra linen here, that's going to go on the back. It might end up being a little too much because this area is really thin, so I might end up trimming that more. In fact, I think I'm going to do that now. Oh, here's another concave area I have to deal with. And then from there, I think I might have to do here too. And from there, I'm going to trim this down a bit more. This is the same technique I use when I'm making, you know, things as simple as Christmas ornaments. I use the heat and bond, and sometimes I pull out the matte medium. So I kind of have a sense of what angles are going to be okay and what ones need a little more trimming. So I'll leave this like this for now. I'm going to clean up my mess a little bit, come back with a little bit of glue, and I'll show you then what I do with that glue. Okay, I'm back here with my piece, and what I did is I went ahead and put down a cardboard box because even though I didn't want to get my tablecloth all gluey, and I tend to make a mess when I glue. So you can see I have all these little ends of the linen that want to go ahead and shred off because the linen is, you know, a gridded fabric. And once you cut into it, all it wants to do is shred. So I'm going to show you where I sort of strategically glue, just to, again, give it a little more strength, give it some integrity, and so that it doesn't unravel and fall apart on me. So now's the time where I'm going to grab my glue brushes. Here they are, my water with my brushes, and my, again, matte medium. This is Golden brand, which is a popular paint brand. And I'm just going to put a little bit of this matte medium right in the cap so that it's a little more manageable. I have this large bottle here that I don't need to be putting hovering all over my rug. And like I said, I have 2 brushes. I have a pretty big inch-wide one, and then I have a little one. And I tend to make a mess when I do this because that is my way. I end up getting glue all over my hands. But you could use gloves. This glue is water soluble, so that also makes it easier for cleaning brushes. You can just clean your hands with soap and water. And what I'm going to do is all those little spots where I glued all the concave spots, I'm going to give a dab of glue to. So I think I'm in frame here. So I'm taking the large brush and doing that. If there's any really tricky spots, I'll switch to that small brush. Let me move this around while I'm doing it so you can see. I'm going to have a lot to do in my circle here. And you know what? I think I might switch to this littler brush because I just feel like I need to be a little more careful. And what I'm doing is I'm just dabbing it on right where I made the cut essentially, but also just trying to get it pretty close to my wool loops without getting the glue on the wool. And you could technically do this from the other side, but I think I like to do it from this side because I like to make sure that I'm not getting glue all over my loops. If I do get a little bit of glue on my wool, I can just kind of like quickly dab it off with some water. So I just feel like I have a little more control. And just kind of get all the way on the linen. Like I said, this glue's acid free, so it's not going to hurt your linen or have it break down. In here, we want to get nice and good. It's really important when you make those snips all the way to the loops, because that's where your rug can really, that's where there's the weight of your loops really puts pressure and stress on your rugs. All right, I think in here's where I did a little bit. Oh, I got a little glue on my loops. Like I said, I just like to wipe it off with my finger. The other nice thing about this glue is it dries absolutely clear. So there'll be no, besides making your linen or your wool a little bit crunchy, you won't be able to detect any kind of color or anything. It's not going to discolor your wool. I'm also just getting this little area the cut is really close to the wool strips. I hope you can see that. So I'm just making sure to get this area really good. And I'm probably going to end up, even after I glue all this, I'm probably going to end up doing some more trimming, you know, maybe like over here, this area especially, because what I'm going to try to do is get, you know, a fold underneath here. It's just a small spot to do that. Okay, let me come back over here. And actually, I didn't make too many cuts. Oh, I see one I missed down here. Sorry, I know I'm off camera. I just want to get this little one while I'm flipping it around. And I think this was the last one. This one looks like it needs a little help. So yeah, the glue is not going to be strong enough to glue my cuts back together, but like I said, it's just filling in the holes of the linen, so the linen just doesn't want to unravel. It just makes the linen a little bit stronger. So I think I'm good with that. I might just touch up a couple places up here since I was doing my pizza circle from the other angle. I'm just now looking at it from this angle and want to make sure that I'm getting everywhere that I wanted to with this tiny brush. Okay, let me put my brushes in water. I think I'm good for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry, and when I come back, I'll show you the ironing, and I might have a different dress on because it's probably going to be tomorrow. This only takes probably about maybe 30-40 minutes to dry, but it's the end of my work day, so I'll leave it here overnight, come back nice and fresh, and I'll show you all that fancy ironing and the heat and bond and how to finish the whole thing when we're all done. Okay. Hello, it is a new day, and I have just come into the studio, and all these little spots that I showed you yesterday have now been glued. So what I did is I just sort of like gently tore them apart. There's this little area over here that's kind of glued itself back together, so I'm just going to go ahead and re-snip this, and it doesn't matter, it's glued now, so basically the linen is a lot more, it's not going to unravel because now it has all that glue in between the fibers that's going to keep it from unraveling. So it doesn't really matter that I snipped it again. It's not going anywhere. So now's the time when I'm going to flip this piece over and start working on these edges from the back. So what I need for this is a nice hot iron, which I'm going to plug in now. And I usually put my iron on the highest temperature setting, and I do use some steam on the linen. Let me get my iron plugged in here. So what I'm going to do working from the back is I'm going to start from these little edges here, these concave points, and I'm basically going to fold along the curved edge, making a little overlap or fold where I need to. Now the good thing about the rug is that all of these loops on the front, they're very fluffy and puffy. So they're gonna cover this edge a little bit. So I know that I don't have to have this edge on the back perfect, because it's just going to be covered up by the floof of the loops. So now that my iron is nice and heated, what I do is I very carefully, oh, you can see the steam coming off that iron. I very carefully put the iron down and move my hand away, because obviously I'm trying not to burn myself. And you can see now this edge is pretty tightly folded back to the back of the rug. So I'm just going to go around and do all of my edges that way. And you can see I'll probably fast forward through this part, but you can kind of follow what I do, see where I make folds. I also don't want to fold it too much, because then I'll have my wool come up. So I'm just folding but lightly, making sure that the rug on the front is still sitting flat. So I'm gonna fast forward through this, but then I'll slow down at certain times, and you can really see the more challenging areas. Again, I'm gonna try to keep moving my rug in the camera view. Okay, so how's that for some fancy folding? So when I'm making these little folds on these convex curves, I'm sort of just I kind of move my fingers around and let the fabric tell me where it wants to fold naturally. I mean, you could make also, if you wanted to get scientific about it, you could say like every third on a curve like this is where you want to fold. Mine's not exactly that, but I just sort of make a judgment call, like where I think the best points to fold are, and make my folds that way. Same thing for this large curve. I kind of just like move my fingers along and fold every couple inches or so, especially on a big old curve like this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick off all these little extra linen pieces from where I snipped and kind of shake it out a little bit. And I want to make sure I look at this from the front, to make sure that there's no angles, like especially like in these areas that look awkward or that you can see too much of the linen from. So the bottom looks pretty good. My only concern is the top. The top is much harder series of folds to make. So I can see like right here is one spot that I want to work on. Here I want to make sure that I fold this back a little bit better. Every other place looks pretty good, maybe even here. So I'm gonna take a look at that now and work on it a little more. Okay, so you can see that basically what I just did to remedy those areas is I just folded everything a little bit tighter. On this area here, I did make one more cut. This area has glue on it, so I know it's not going to be an issue. So I just cut one more little snip and pulled it a little bit tighter, so I know that's a little bit better. I hope you can hear me. Somebody just started with a saw next door. It's a busy day here at the studio, so hopefully you can hear me. If not, I'll throw this text up on the screen so I can explain this in captioning as well. So let me turn this over again, see if it's to my liking. Yep, that looks a lot better. So now you can't see that linen as much. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of fluff my loops back out to make sure that they're hiding the linen too. So that's it for this step. I'm going to come back with my heat and bond. Basically, the next step is to work from the back again and cover this whole piece with heat and bond glue paper that I'm going to show you next. So stay tuned. Okay, I'm back here. What I wanted to go get was my scraps of heat and bond. Today is Earth Day, and I want to make sure I'm using all these little pieces that are discarded from other projects in kind of an effort to recycle and waste little. But I mentioned earlier that the product we're going to be using to do the second part of gluing on our project is this product called Heat and Bond. It comes in a roll where one side is matte and one side is shiny, and basically what it is, it's a paper with glue, heat activated glue on one side. So I'm going to use this roll down on the larger area, but I want to make sure I'm using up some scraps and kind of building it along this more delicate area. And I want to start with this more delicate area because I know it's all ironed and tacked down exactly where I want it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of like piece pieces of this heat and bond together in order to kind of like build
this part up, make sure that it doesn't get ruined or move or anything like that. I'm gonna do this, use these little pieces and use my iron simultaneously. And you can go make your pieces of heat and bond go beyond. In fact, I recommend that they go beyond the edges of what you're actually adhering, and then you can trim it down later on. So let me move all this stuff I have in my way out of the way, and I'm just gonna use a nice hot iron. And you do want to press down on high heat, pressing down with your iron to make sure it adheres fully. And I usually press my iron for maybe 5 seconds. Give it a few seconds to dry, and you can kind of test the edge to make sure it adhered, and it did not. So I'm gonna go back with my iron. You know what, since I took a small break, I think that my iron cooled down a little bit, you know, which most irons do when they go idle. So I'm just gonna press it down in all spots, give it a little steam, just make it a little hotter, and there we go. And I'm gonna actually get into all these areas here, so you can watch me sort of build this up. And hopefully you can hear me. I work in a studio next to a woodworker, and he's got his saws going, but you know, we do our best here. I like my studio, and I like my neighbor. He's just noisy sometimes. So I'll speed through this because it's gonna take me a little bit to do this. So it might be hard to see on the video, but especially when I'm ironing on this large piece, one of the ways you can tell it's adhering is that you can see through, I can see my rug through it. I can also see it wrinkling a little bit as it adheres to my linen and the back of my rug. So I was quiet as I built up the top of my piece because I know I'm probably will have sped it up for you. But basically, what I did is I filled it in with a puzzle. Even any place where there's an edge, I really wanted to make sure that I got a little piece of heat and bond, like here and over here, because this is really going to help the wool that I have adhere to the back of the rug. So I want to make sure I'm getting all the edges, and I can put in a little bit of glue like here and here, that I know is probably going to be a little bit of a issue to make sure that I have the wool glued down perfectly. I could have taken a large sheet of heat and bond and put it over the back. It probably would have been easier, but like I said, I have all this like leftover scrap that I wanted to use up. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip this over, and between my scissors and my X-Acto knife, I'm gonna go in and I'm going to cut the edges of my rug down. And what I'm gonna try to do is I'm gonna try to just snip the heat and bond as much as I can. I definitely don't want to cut any of my loops, and I definitely don't want to cut my linen edge there that I folded so nicely down. So I'm just cutting this little piece of paper off. So yeah, I will do that now. I have to use my scissors. Well, I'll probably use my scissors for anything that's convex, and for anything that's concave, I'm gonna have to get in there with an X-Acto knife. So you want a nice sharp X-Acto knife. Another good reason for working on a piece of cardboard, or mat board or foam core if you have it. The X-Acto knives work really good on those materials. So here the glue stuck to some of my loops. It's not a big deal, I'm just separating. What I'm really looking for is the heat and bond stuck to my linen, not so much my loops. So I can just kind of pull any little fuzzy loops that got stuck to my heat and bond, just pull them off and continue to trim that paper. And I'm gonna get in here with the scissors so I don't accidentally cut anything I don't want to. Just have a little more control with the scissors. So I have one more spot over here. I think I can get with the scissors. It's funny, sometimes I feel like I have more control with the knife, sometimes depending on the angle, I feel like I have more control with the scissors. So here I'm gonna get the scissors a little bit. So I really kind of keep both of them around, and just depending on the angle of what I'm cutting. Maybe that has something to do with being a lefty, I don't know. So now my piece it feels good, it feels strong and secure. This part up here, which would be the weakest point, it really feels like it has a little bit of weight to it now, which is very cool because, as you can imagine, when I first cut this out of the linen, this is really, really floppy. But now, because I folded the linen back to the back of it, feels like it has a little bit of integrity. And this is going to be the top, so I really want this to be strong and to feel as strong as it can. So I know my workstation's a mess here, but it's about to be even messier, because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start peeling all of this paper off of the heat and bonds, and that's going to leave my glue back completely covered in glue. This is, again, just the way I do it. I probably could, if I really wanted to, have covered the whole thing in matte medium and adhered the wool and let it dry. I've never tried doing that. I think it would just be too much of like a wet mess for me. So that's why I don't go with the traditional, liquid glue route. I just use it in some areas to help. I feel like this heat and bond, it's also, people use it in quilting as like an interfacing, so it adds a little bit more sort of structure to your piece. And I think that's why I like putting it in between the linen and the wool fabric that I'm gonna use on the back of this rug. So if you're somebody who really liked stickers as a child, you might really find this process of peeling all this paper off very cathartic. I'm one of those people. It certainly comes off faster than it goes on. And you can see there's like a slight sheen to the back of the rug now. That's all the glue. Okay, now here's the big one. I think I failed to mention too, the heat and bond, it glues as it cools down, or I'm sorry, it dries as it cools down. So once this is cool to the touch, that's basically when you know that your glue is set and dry. So I'm gonna clean up my workstation a little bit and come back and show you the last couple of steps. Okay, I'm back here. I've cleaned up my area a little bit. I have my piece down on my cardboard. I have my wool end that I'm going to cut down to a more manageable size. So basically I'm looking for something that will cover the piece completely, and I'm just going to lay this over. I want it to overlap all the edges, and I can tell it's doing that because I can basically just feel around my piece and in the hole here and make sure that's covering everything completely. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna find my edge here. I think I'm off frame, so you probably can't see, but basically I'm just snipping and ripping the wool down to the size that I want, which again is a bit larger than my piece. And what I'm gonna do, this has like a thready edge on it. I'm gonna snip that and cut it off because I feel like it's creating a little bit of puckering on my edge that I don't want to deal with. Because what I want to do now is I want to smooth this over my piece just like I had previously. I basically want to just run my hands around it, making sure I'm smoothing it out, and especially up in this area where there's a hole. I don't want there to be any kind of stress on the fabric. I just want it to lay with the indent there, giving it a little bit of flexibility. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take my really hot iron. So this one, you want the iron to be very, very hot. And I'm gonna move my camera a little bit. Whoop. Maybe you can see what I'm doing now, because I'm gonna start from this end. It's really important for me not to move the piece around the camera, but move the camera around the piece, because now that I have it all flattened out, I don't wanna mess it up. So I'm working again from the most delicate area, which is that big circle, and moving down. And the reason is because I want it to basically fit here the best, and then the wool's gonna kind of like, it's gonna flex a little bit as I move this way, as it adheres. So I wanna make sure that this most delicate area is kind of dealt with first. You can see I'm gonna keep smoothing out these little wrinkles that are created as the wool kind of adheres and stretches. And it's important to me that it fits this hole really well. So I'm gonna use some steam. Don't like this little wrinkle, so I'm gonna pull this up a little bit and see if I can re-adhere it. Not exactly sure why it's doing that, but that's all right. The nice thing about the heat and bond is as it's heated, you can kind of pull up what you're working with and readjust and put it back. It's just once it dries that it's harder to do that. It cools and dries. So you can see there's another little wrinkle. Some little wrinkles are being created. Just using my hands to smooth out what I'm doing. So always work from one side, one direction to another. And I'm not stretching the wool as I move my hand over it. I'm just sort of flattening out those wrinkles. So yeah, so you need a nice and hot iron because the heat needs to travel through this wool and touch that glue. So we move my camera back now. Whoop. I think hopefully that's good, but you can kind of see why I'm working the way I am. Because it's important to keep the piece still and just have me move from right to left over it. When you can start to see a little dimension of your rug sort of come through the wool, you know that it's sticking, not adhering. Top looks pretty good though. So what I'm doing, you probably can't see, is I'm just sort of pulling the wool and seeing what sticks. So top, good. Bottom, not so good. Sides, pretty good. You can see the spots that need help. So let me keep going with the iron. All All right, and flipped my piece back over. All my edges are pretty much dry and glued. So now what I'm doing is I'm kind of just fluffing some areas back up with all that pressing down with the hot iron. Some of these loops, they just got a little squished. So I'm just sort of refluffing, cleaning up all the lint and things that have gotten on this piece. So now what I'm going to do is it's time for me to cut out this hole here. It's the one part I'm a little bit nervous about because I'm going to use my X-Acto knife again in order to do this. And it's just, it's kind of like if I mess this part up, I don't know how easily it's going to be to fix. But I mean, I probably shouldn't go into it with that attitude, but I can't lie. I am a little tiny bit nervous about it. That's okay though, you still got to do it. So I'm gonna start probably from this bottom edge, and I'm just cutting away. What was that? I'm afraid I'm gonna slip and really cut something that I'm not supposed to cut. So here's my first little cut here. I'm probably cutting, I would say maybe a couple millimeters away from my linen. So I'm not trying to butt up against it. Again, we're lucky that our loops, at least in my case, my loops are so big that they sort of fluff out beyond the linen and the edge. So I think that's why I can leave a little bit of this oatmeal here. The last time I made a piece that had a hole in it, I used a dark colored background. I used an eggplant colored background, and I had to get much closer to the linen, and you could see the eggplant a little bit. So that's why I switched to doing a lighter color this time, with the theory that it'll blend into whatever wall this is hung on. Okay, so probably hard for you to see, but I'm just trying to get sort of underneath my loops, pressing down quite a bit in order to get through this oatmeal. There we go. Now you could finish pieces like this in a variety of ways, I suppose. You could make something maybe harder to put on the back, you know, some sort of wooden frame. You know, you could make something on the back of here. You don't have to cover a piece like this in fabric. If you were really handy, you know, making something out of wood would be really cool. You probably wouldn't even have to, you don't have to finish the back and put wool on it, take this extra step like I'm doing. If it's a wall hanging, you could just leave the linen exposed. I just didn't want to do that for some reason. I feel the need to add a little bit of coverage to the back to make it look, I don't know, prettier, I guess. Wonder if I can get in here with the scissors at all. Let's see. I think that I can. Ta-da! All right, you can see those outer edges are a lot easier to cut away. I might just do a little more trimming on here, but I think we can tack it up on the wall and see what we think, and fluff and puff any little things that need a little fluffing and puffing. So when we come back, I'll show you how I hang these. It's really easy, so BRB. Okay, I am back with my piece that's been all finished. I'm kind of holding it out in front of me and filming with the other hand, so sorry if it's a little bit shaky. I want to show you the back when everything's said and done, what the back of the piece ended up looking like. I'm just holding it up with one hand, so it's a little bit wonky right now, but you can see that oatmeal wool is pretty smooth on the back and covers up all of those folds of linen. Again, just keeping everything nice and tight and tucked away under there. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to flip this over and we're going to start tacking it up on the wall. So what I have and how I tend to tack my work up is I use map pins, and I buy these multicolored sets because well, basically I have multicolored work, so I can kind of match the pin to the color that I need of the loops that I am that are in my work. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. So this is going to be challenging because I'm going to have to pin the first couple without holding the phone because I am one person. So I'm going to set up the easel back so you can see me pinning, and then I'll bring the phone back and kind of show you a detail of what I'm doing. Hello. All right, I have the camera set up here so you can kind of see closer to the wall how I'm tacking up my shaped rug piece. I'm really going to be working from the top. I'm going to put about 5 or 6 pins in, and I'm going to show you a little far away and then move the camera angle so you can see exactly where they're going. So basically right now I'm just holding the rug up how it kind of comfortably wants to hang on the wall, and I'm gonna just put my arm across because if I were to just hold it from here, the whole thing is gonna kind of flop down. In fact, I'll show you. See how it just kind of flops. So I'm just kind of holding it more from the right underneath, and then kind of making sure that it's smoothed out. Again, I know you can't see everything. And I mentioned earlier how I use these colored map pins. So I'm gonna start with my yellow ones, and I'm just gonna go right in between the loops. You don't wanna go through the loops with these map pins just because, well, firstly, you wouldn't be able to fluff the loops over them and hide the pin, but secondly, it's just not really good for the wool to tack right through it. So I'm going to put about 3 yellow pins in. Again, I'm just kind of fluffing the loops back around. I know you can't see all of what I'm doing. Let me move the camera a little bit this way so you can get more of a sense of how I'm doing it. So that's 3 yellow so far. And then now I'm gonna kind of fix this over here. I'm gonna put an orange one in. That's one nice thing about finishing the back with fabric, is that I can pin right through it. I'm gonna put a green one in. And then I have another yellow one I'm gonna put like down here. And I could pin all over this. I could keep going if I felt like I needed more down here, if I had an especially large rug that needed all 4 corners tacked, then I could keep going. I could put pins all over this thing. Ugh. I might be in a stud over here. I might not be able to put them through. It's harder down here. You know what? I feel pretty good. I don't feel like I actually need another pin. So let me get a little closer so you can see those little pin points. So if you look in the orange, it's hidden right in there.
I don't know if you can see it, and the green one's hidden in there, but with these loops kind of fluffed over them, they're almost indistinguishable. And whoops, especially indistinguishable once you get further away. Look, you can't even see them. So if you want to take your work down, you don't know where all the pins are, what I usually do is I just kind of poke my hand behind the rug, and then I can feel where the pins are, and that way I'm putting just a little bit of pressure on the pin without putting pressure on my rugs. And I just put my fingers behind, pop the pins out, and I would do the same for the rest. But for now, because I really like this rug, I am going to leave it here. So I'm going to put those pins right back in. So it's simple. There we go. All right. Thank you so much for being a part of this video. And if you have any questions, you can give me an email or drop them in the comments, or we can start a discussion about maybe other ways to finish shape work. Thanks for going on this little adventure with me, and talk to you later.